Interrompemos esse podcast para perguntar: quem você quer ser?
Designer, engenheira, pedagoga,
administrador.
Quer saber? O Senac EAD é nota máxima no MEC. Tem cursos de diversas áreas, com conteúdo elaborado por especialistas do mercado e professores mestres e doutores. Ainda tem o Senac Carreiras, conectando estudantes a vagas de emprego em todo o país. Saiba mais em ead.senac.br/graduação.
The Flashing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast about The Nanny, the 90s sitcom starring Fran Drescher. If you don't know by now what podcast you're listening to, I can't really help you. I am Shawn Pasquale here, as always, with Toria Sheffield. Hi, Toria.
Hi, hello.
And we're not alone. For the first time in a couple of weeks, we're not alone. This is a very special episode because we have a guest on who you might know as Robbie Shapiro from Victorious, or maybe you know him from Will Ferrell's Virginity Hit.
No, probably not.
Or maybe you know him as Steve in that one episode of Grey's Anatomy.
Oh my God. Somebody has IMDb.
Or maybe you've seen him online streaming Fortnite on Twitch with me. Please give an Oh, Mr. Sheffield welcome to actor, musician, tiny dancer, my friend, Matt Bennet. Hi, Matt Bennet.
Hey, crew. Hey, Shawn. Hey, Toria. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Also, Shawn, did you know that, yes, Renée Taylor, like Matt has been on a show with Renée Taylor, but also Charles Shaughnessy?
No.
Yes.
Right?
I feel very qualified to be on this podcast because Renée Taylor played my character on Victorious, Robbie Shapiro's grandmother named Mima. And then Charles Shaughnessy, I realized as I was watching this episode, I was like, oh, wait, we worked with Charles Shaughnessy as well. Full disclosure, I still had never watched The Nanny until I watched this one episode. This is the one episode that I'd ever watched. So at the time, the moms on set were like, oh my God, it's Mr. Sheffield. It's Mr. Sheffield. And I'm like, oh yeah, hey, what's up, British guy? You know,
so
I had no feelings towards him. Yes, he was on Victorious.
Who did he play? Do you remember?
So I only had one scene with him, but he played, his name was Mason Thornsmith, and he was the record executive who discovers Victoria. They have a couple of couple arcs where he makes, it's called Tori Goes Platinum. That he makes her a star. And I guess what is the exact circumstance? He's like scouting around for talent and tries to make Victoria's character into like something she's not. Like he's like, you have to go flip over tables and be a nuisance.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to know Matt's memories or impressions of Renée Taylor and Charles Shaughnessy. But if they're bad, please don't tell me. If they're bad, just lie to me.
Overwhelmingly positive. The most that I remember. So, granted, these events took place 10 years ago. So, all of the finer details have sort of been lost to the sands of time. But the one thing I can say about Renée, she's a pro and she's been in the industry for years. And she was a little name droppy. But in a cool way, because she was sitting, she like, oh, Gene Wilder, one of my old friends. And I'm like, she knows Gene Wilder? Oh my God. And would just tell me about, I wanted to look through her phone, and look at all of the numbers that she had. She would tell me about things like that. The only other thing that I really remember was she fell asleep on set. She just nodded off and a couple of times and we had to just kind of let her be. But it was cute because it's Renée Taylor. She looked great on The Nanny. I was watching, I'm like, oh, get it, Renée. Hell yeah.
Yeah. She was in real good shape for her age on The Nanny, especially. Was she still with the big hair and put together like that when she was on Victorious, or had she sort of modernized her look a little bit?
No, she looked kind of the same.
Awesome.
Wow.
Amazing. And what about Charles Shaughnessy? Did you...
The most I remember from Charles, once again, we only had one scene together. So I'd see him at table reads and everything. The moms would melt. They were so excited that Mr. Sheffield was there.
That's amazing.
And we had one scene. So once again, he was in a couple of episodes and I had one part where, so my character was a ventriloquist and they introduced that Mason Thornesmith, his character, had a son who wanted to buy my ventriloquist dummy, his name was Rex. So that was the scene that we had together. And yeah, I mean, he was just cool, professional, kind of not that he kept to himself, just, when one of the things that we had a problem with on the set of Victorious, we were all like 17, 18, 19. So we could not stop talking to each other. And he was just kind of like nodding his head in the back. Like, okay.
Sure. Well, yeah, you're surrounded by kids and you're an adult and you're like, all right, there's only so much that I have to participate in.
Well, what I'm kind of interested, once again, only episode of The Nanny I've watched. Was there like Sheffield fever in the 90s? Do you guys, when you watch this, are you like, oh my God, he's so attractive? Because the moms were like, oh my God, he's so attractive.
I have thought about that because between Shawn and myself, I'm really the only one qualified, I think, to be like, would I want to get that? And I've weirdly thought no for some reason. I don't know why. He's a handsome man, but he's very, I don't know. He has a very fatherly vibe. He's not like, a John Stamos of that era.
When you go back and watch Full House, he still has it going on. Yeah. There's something dated about the Mr. Sheffield character's look when I was watching.
I agree. I think that maybe this was a character that resonated more with moms of even the time of the show. I mean, the show came out in like 93 and I think ran for like till 98 or my math's probably off, 6 years. But I think that like my mom, I can remember my mom watching this show with me and my mom thinking Mr. Sheffield was hot, so I think that like that tracks, especially if the moms on set, for Victorious were also into him. Like they would have also been, similar to my mom's age.
Not to mention he looked good on Victorious. Like he stayed in shape, still thin. He kind of aged more into his features.
Yeah.
What do they call him? Like a silver fox?
Yeah.
He sort of showed up and it was like, plus also he was playing a record executive. So they dressed him really cool. But yeah, I was like, okay, I get this. Like when he was on Victorious, I'm like, yeah, this guy's absolutely attractive. But then I was watching the show, I'm like, he's kind of dorky.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's the why. Because there's definitely been shows that I watched when I was younger, and then I rewatched them as adults. Like I remember it was like a new stage of my life when I was like, oh my God, like Giles is attractive to me when I rewatched Buffy as an adult, which was so weird because he was like the dad to me when I was watching it in real time. And then I was like, oh, I've fully become a woman now that I could,
I'm adult now.
Yeah, but that's just, it's not happening to me.
Isn't that funny?
with Mr. Sheffield.
Yeah, one of the things I've been doing on Twitch is we've been watching movies and we did The Parent Trap. And when it came out, like the 1999 version, I was 7 or 8 and I had such a crush on Lindsay Lohan. And now I'm watching and I'm like, Meredith, oh my God. Elaine Hendricks. And I'm like, oh boy. And she's 20, she plays a 26-year-old and I'm pushing 30. And I was like, oh my God. If this were if I found her on Hinge, I would pay to DM her. That's an option.
That's so good. Yeah, no, we're gonna have to cut this because I'm just babbling now. But no, I recently was like, I felt like such an idiot. I was like, whoa, Robert Redford.
Oh my God.
Like, he was always old to me. And then I finally saw like The Way We Were. And I was like, hubba. Like, has anyone else noticed this guy? So it is just weird when you finally start being old enough to find these people attractive.
So, okay, we've established Bennett's bona fides. But interestingly enough, as Matt mentioned, he's never seen an episode of The Nanny until now. So I think it'll be interesting. Well, when we first hopped on this to this record, Matt mentioned that he had questions. So Matt, I think as Tori and I sort of walk through the episode and you have questions, if you still have questions, feel free to interject and ask them.
I took extensive notes. I watched the episode twice, so I made sure I knew what was going on. And the first thing I wrote is, who are these children? Neither one looks like Fran Drescher. I need more context.
Wait, and I'll quickly say for the audience, this is the episode where Grandma Yetta comes to stay with the Sheffields. Okay, everybody needs a bubba sometimes. Yeah. So that's setting us off, and Yes.
So
A lot of it's
I think
like,
that
who's
title-
this guy now? Like
I think
a lot of what I
think
wrote.
you mispronounced that title because the title is supposed to be a play on "Everybody Needs Somebody Sometimes."
So
it's
everybody
needs a Bubby sometimes. Yeah,
Everybody. You're right. But it's spelled Bubba in the
Bubby.
actual.
B-U-B-B-Y or B-U-B-B-I-E.
Oh, I guess I just
or-
mistyped it. Okay, that's the issue.
Oops.
But yes, Fran Drescher is their nanny, and Mr. Sheffield was widowed 5 years earlier. So
Mhm.
the three children, Maggie, the eldest, Brighton, the middle, the boy, and then Gracie, the little girl, they are all Mr. Sheffield's. And Fran has been their nanny for about a year now and has brought a lot of much needed maternal warmth into this family's lives.
And there's been a slow building, although it's not really touched on in this episode, but there's a slow building romance boiling between Mr. Sheffield and Fran.
Ooh.
And
I really ship it and Stan.
yes,
For true.
same, as do we all. And then Cece, who is the blonde lady, she works with Mr. Sheffield. He's a Broadway producer. There's a lot of Broadway references in a lot of episodes. They make a lot of references to musicals. Angela Weber's a guest on this show multiple times as himself.
Wow.
So Cece, it's sort of established early on that Cece is in some type of relationship with Mr. Sheffield, or they've done it a couple times. It's like kind of unclear, but she pines after him.
Yeah, I would say that it was ambiguous at the beginning of the first season, but now it's clear that I'm not even sure I don't think they've consummated anything. I think she's just in love with him, or just wants him, and he never ever looks like even notices her like that.
So
that's
Shawn,
where I think we've landed.
Shawn gave me a little bit of context that you guys end with Fran or Cece.
Yeah.
Cece is sometimes sympathetic because she was hard villain in this episode.
Almost never sympathetic.
Okay.
I slightly disagree.
There was one episode about Cece's dad that made her a little sympathetic, but for the most part, this is the character she played. She's tough. She's hard. She exists to get Fran out of the picture, and she exists to be the butt of everyone else's jokes.
Yeah, there was a moment in this where the butler Giles, no, what's the guy? Niles. Thank you.
Close. Yeah.
He says Aunt Yetta or Grandma Yetta got some sweet lovin'. What did you do last night? And she goes, I hate my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, I like the reading of that. That was cool.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. One, we realized very early in season 1, we were like, oh, Cece is not there to generate a love triangle plot engine by any means. It's very clear that she's never going to end up with Mr. Sheffield. He doesn't care about her at all. That's not even really part of it. She's just the worst, and everyone can just make jokes about how she's the worst, and that kind of is why she's there.
It's someone for the other characters to dunk on, and I think it's the writer's voice for their own cynicism.
Well, I was also going to say that one thing that makes me sad is she was never nominated for an Emmy for
Cece?
her.
Yeah.
No, never.
And
but there's
great.
there's another side character on the show who wasn't in this episode who is. And I don't know. I feel like I would have liked this actress to get at least a little love for this,
Villains usually don't get their due.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout cinema and television history, they never really get their due.
There's a weird cameo in this episode that I wonder if either one of you caught. It wouldn't have been a cameo at the time.
Not Barry Watson.
Yes.
Oh yeah, obviously. I have a whole thing about that later.
Yes. Barry Watson pops up for 2 seconds and doesn't get a lot. Seventh Heavens, Barry Watson.
We've talked about this, how weeks and weeks ago when we did Nanny Trivia, Maggie had 2 famous boyfriends on the show, James Marsden, Eddie, and Barry Watson. And so this is where
Barry Watson appearance.
Yeah.
Oh, he just waves.
He's the guy that she's kissing?
Yeah.
By the way, in my notes, I wrote, I do not approve of this. Before the conflict even happened, I was like, nuh-uh.
We're going to get into that too, because that is another thing that Shawn and I discuss a lot, the parenting choices specifically around Maggie's dating life. And we have found out through this podcast that we're both very overprotective people and pretty sex negative. Because I also was like, ugh.
I'm sex positive. I'm like, go for it. But I don't know. There's something about they've been out there for so long, and something about like there was a line about like pawing at each other. I don't know. I was like,
like a lot.
It's like
it
no,
seems disrespectful right in front of her house on like the front.
Well, wait, we'll get there. We're in the weeds about a lot of stuff with this episode already, which is exciting because it means we all are invested.
We're having a good time. So Grandma Yetta Grandma Yetta is over with Sylvia and Fran, and they're all having a good time. And Sylvia drops on Fran, oh, Yetta has to stay here because her apartment building is being fumigated. So she's her retirement home. Yeah, so she's not able to go back to her retirement home. So Fran has to quickly convince Mr. Sheffield that this is okay. And then they're stuck with Grandma Yetta, who, as we've established, I think in earlier episodes, she smokes. She's got quite a mouth on her. She's like very dirty and sexual. She's great. I love this character.
Yeah. So that's the A plot. And then the B plot is that, there's tension between Mr. Sheffield and Maggie in terms of her dating life. He thinks she's staying out too late. He finds a copy of the movie Body Heat in her room, which he thinks is very inappropriate. And he doesn't like the fact that she's been seeing this new guy, Greg. And this is our first introduction to Greg. We've already cycled through Kenny. We've cycled through that philosopher guy. We've cycled through Eddie. So yet another boy in Margaret's
How
life.
old is Margaret supposed to be?
15. Only 15.
Only 15.
I found, if we're doing plot summaries, I found the plot to be slightly muddled and slightly confused. The whole Yetta saying we could die at any time, go for it, comes in at 16:30.
Yes.
In a 23-minute episode, like that seemed to be the conflict, and it came in so late.
Matt Bennet, this is a recurring issue with this show. There are episodes that really nail the structure, and then we've had episodes where like the main plot of the show doesn't get set up until the second to last scene, and then it's resolved in like the very next scene.
It happened really fast, and then the episode was over, and I go, it's so confusing to me.
Like, literally, like, I wish we could pull quotes from previous records, because it's like you quoted us verbatim, where it's like, you were like, it was kind of weird because this came in at minute 17 in a 22-minute episode. Like, the most notorious time that this happened is when Fran walks in on Mr. Sheffield naked at minute 17, and it gets resolved in 5 minutes. Okay. Oh, like, shouldn't that have been like the central
whole episode?
That's a great idea for an episode. Like, stretch that. Yeah, I felt like there was things that they could have stretched longer. More things that Yetta could have done. I mean, they did a good job of like you brought Saul over. She burnt the bagels. The one of my favorite things that she did. They're having a conversation, and this is minute 8:44. She comes in smoking a cigarette, dancing with a boombox.
Yes.
It's like bing, bitty, bing, bitty, bing. And she goes, "Can I sit outside of my brassiere? Will anyone see?" Like, that was just a funny, like, I wanted to see more moments like that. Yes. But then, towards the end, when it should have been culminating, like all this tension, it just kind of fell flat.
Yes. And so it's like, I also kind of took issue with just the central conflict of the episode that bridges the A and the B plot. It felt very contrived in a sitcom-y way, which is one of my least favorite things, where it's like basically the central conflict is Yetta goes and talks to Maggie. Like, she's gone out and she stayed out too late on a date, and Mr. Sheffield's really upset. So Yetta's kind of like, I'll talk to her. So they go upstairs. And then the next morning, everything seems resolved. And it's sort of, Maggie's like, oh, I'm sorry I was out late. I'm sorry I yelled at you, Dad. I had a great conversation with Yetta. And then he's very, appeased by this. So he lets her go on another date that day. And then it is revealed that Grandma Yetta has been like having this older gentleman over to have sex with him. And it's also revealed that, apparently, Mr. Sheffield, he's so upset about this that he's like, well, what did you say to my daughter? And she says, well, I told her life is short, go for it. So then, like, the next many minutes of the episode are Mr. Sheffield being furious because he's convinced that this means that Maggie is going to be like off having sex on her date because she had this one conversation with Grandma Yetta.
I feel like this episode could have been a two-parter, just like, stretching when it comes, the thing that happens at 17 minutes, where she says, we could die at any time, go for it. That's such a perfect little sting for a cliffhanger. Like, come back next week and see more Yetta, see more Saul, see more of these characters. Because then, after I finish watching this for the second time, the next episode started, and it's just a completely different storyline.
My question to you guys is, like, obviously it's not great structure, but is it just that they have an overabundance of like great characters and ideas that like this show sometimes just seems to barrel through what could be multiple episodes or multiple plot lines, and not let things breathe because they're really just trying to like churn them out?
That's a sitcom problem in general.
Yeah. And but I guess that's a sign. The show is on for 6 years. So it's like, I think that's a sign of like good sitcom problems to have.
Yeah. And it's like, when there's 22 episodes a season, like, you're not going to win them all. There's some like home run episodes, and there's going to be some where you're like, okay, I had some laughs.
Yeah, and I laughed. I certainly
did laugh.
Yeah. So really quickly, it all gets resolved when it's revealed that Grandma Yetta had the names of the daughters confused. So she had told little Gracie that life is short, so just seize the day and go for it, because Gracie, is always in an existential crisis, and she, was Brighton had played this mean trick on her and told her that an asteroid was going to hit the Earth in a year. She had actually told Maggie like nothing of the sort in terms of like, you should go for it. And so Mr. Sheffield realizes it's, all his anxiety has been for naught. And then Maggie, while she does come home late on her date, when she talks to Fran about it, she's basically like, oh no, like, Greg and I actually decided to cool it because, like, at the end of the day, I don't feel ready, and I would never do anything like that without talking to you first anyway. So, all hoopla for nothing. But I will say this: Mr. Sheffield and Fran do have, one of their very nice grounding moments that we get every few episodes, where, when he's agonizing over the fact that Maggie is still not home from her date, and it's like after dark, she's like, you don't want to be her enemy. Like, she's a teenage girl. You like go upstairs, pretend you're not bothered by this, like, and they can hear her coming in the door. She's like, I'll take care of this. And she kind of talks him off a ledge. And it's, that yin and yang of Mr. Sheffield and Fran. And that's like sort of a big emotional crux of this whole series. And we get some of that. She is a good influence on him. She does, of course, initially scream at Maggie, like, where were you? Like, it's clear that she was really pissed, but she's trying to, like, help him parent because he's parenting solo. So we get a little of that. It's not just a completely fluff episode. And then, they're fine. Everything's all good.
And then we get maybe my favorite part of the episode, which is a post-credit scene where they're watching Mike Myers' coffee talk.
I had so many questions about that.
Okay. So I figured, and I know that some of our audience skews younger. So, okay. Coffee Talk was a segment on Saturday Night Live.
Oh my God, you're going to explain Coffee Talk?
Hold on. Wait, Sean, are we in segments now?
I don't.
Are we finishing the episode?
I think we're going to finish the episode with a post-credit scene explainer.
Okay.
So Coffee Talk was a SNL sketch that Mike Myers did. Austin Powers guy. The character was named Linda Richmond, and she was this stereotypical Jewish woman, very much like Sylvia is portrayed on the show, based on Mike Myers' mother-in-law at the time. And that's it. She's just a stereotype, and so
many of this, like,
weird scene at the end where the nanny, Fran, Sylvia, and Grandma are all watching Mike Myers and not realizing how much it's just a reflection of them.
So many stereotypical Jewish mother, grandmother lines that have permeated pop culture. The pop culture lexicon came from Linda Richmond. I'm verklempt, talk amongst yourselves. All of those are things that Mike Myers brought to SNL that then, seeped into pop culture.
Yeah, she's obsessed with Barbara Streisand.
Yeah.
There's the thing of it is, I can certainly speak to Jewish stereotypes, and a lot of them are stereotypes because they do ring very true. Like, I definitely think that, like, my mom had an obsession with Barbara Streisand, and it wasn't because like she was a fan of The Nanny.
My uncle has an obsession with Barbara Streisand.
Yeah, she was a fan of Linda, of Mike Myers' impression. She just loved, like a lot of young Jewish women at that time period grew up loving Barbara Streisand.
I mean, she was representation. It was back in the 60s, 70s. Barbara Streisand was the Jewish representation. She did it all. She sang, she danced, she acted. All
right, Toria, now I think we can play the segments theme song.
And now, segments.
So, segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria. So, Matt, that means that now we're officially in segments.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome to the new world.
It's different over here.
So the first thing we just talk about is we just share our favorite like moments or lines. It could be an outfit, it could be a detail, whatever.
Okay.
One of my favorites is when Fran is talking about the idea of Grandma Yetta staying with them. At first, she presents it as almost like a joke, like just to kind of get a temperature read on if Mr. Sheffield will be okay with it. And she's like, I mean, can you imagine? She's a borderline klepto. We wouldn't have a candy dish left in the house.
I also had that line written down.
Well, first thing, I'm just going to start with my notes from the beginning because I did say, who are these children? Neither one looks like Fran Drescher, any more context. And then I have my note from the second watch. I don't like the boy. But
yes.
I think he's cool because he had a Game Boy. That really stood out to me because he's playing Game Boy. I'm like, that kid's cool. But as far as like moments, there's a really great awkward beat when they hug at 1:55 where Yetta and I wrote down Mason Thornsmith, Charles Shaughnessy, Mr. Sheffield. They hug, and I really thought that the body language from both of them was great.
Yes, the forced hug.
Yes,
he's kind of pulling away while she's bringing him in closer.
There's a moment where neither one of it felt like both of the actors didn't know exactly what was happening, and it really worked.
Yeah, it worked really well.
It almost felt like a fourth wall break, where it's like, what let's just we'll go for it and stay in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like she was very open to hugging, and he was a British man who was very put off by too much personal contact. And, I think that was both their characters and probably described them in real life too.
Yeah. I got the biggest laugh out loud moment. Like I literally barked with laughter when Yetta says she'll talk to Maggie after this big fight with Mr. Sheffield, and she's walking up the stairs with Maggie. And then Fran looks at Mr. Sheffield and she's like, see how great Yetta is with kids? She's going to be a great influence on Maggie. And then we just hear Yetta go, want a cigarette?
Yeah, that was good.
The delivery was so funny.
There were some dark lines that I liked. I'm jumping around a little bit.
Yeah.
The butler had a great line where he said, we never say a cross word in our family. We just die we die very early of colon disorders. It was just like, oh God.
Yeah.
He had very little to do in this episode. So all I know is it was just kind of dark.
Yeah, he gets a lot of the glib. He gets to deliver, most of the glib dialogue. Like that's not really, Fran doesn't really go that dark. It's really Niles and Cece get a lot of those lines.
He also had a line after Yetta and Saul are caught in bed together. He comes up and he says, Mrs. Whatever, Mr. Whatever, good morning. And they turn and go, you know them? And he goes, my room was directly beneath theirs. Bravo. That was cool.
Yeah.
I liked when Grandma Yetta walked through the living room and she slapped Fran and Mr. Sheffield with the banana and just said, don't fight in front of the kids, because it reminded me so much of my great grandma. Like, walking into my house and smacking both my parents because they were yelling at each other.
Here's a weird thing. I'm realizing most of my favorite lines are from Niles. There's the scene where they're having breakfast downstairs and he's holding a baggie, and Charles Shaughnessy says, what is that? And he says, Yetta says this tea bag still has 7 cups of tea in it.
Yes.
I'm like, that's very, very on point.
Yeah.
Niles is like a standout of this show. Like even last week, we even discussed, we were like, could Niles have had his own spinoff? And then we were like, no, that's too much Niles. But like, he is one of the best characters, like hands down.
Hear me out. Niles and Gunther from Central Perk have their own spinoff. They were serving similar energy.
Gunther wins the lottery and immediately buys like a giant house and hires a butler. And go.
Wait, you know what? I just realized Matt, there's something really delicious that you don't know about Niles. He has been Mr. Sheffield's butler since Mr. Sheffield was a baby. So Mr. Sheffield has never known life without this man because Niles' father was the butler.
So
he's basically Alfred.
Yes. Because Niles' father was the Sheffield's family butler, and Niles was like a kid growing up in the house, but like very much the help. So I think he was like 10 or 12 when Mr. Sheffield was born. So like he remembers Mr. Sheffield's first words. Like he has been with this man for like all of Mr. Sheffield's life.
That's weird.
Isn't that weird?
Yes. Which is also why it sometimes makes sense that he can be very insolent and say things that a normal staff member, you'd be like, oh, I'm not really sure that wouldn't get you fired. But it's like Mr. Sheffield truly knows no other way.
So there was a couple of scenes with Cece and Niles. Mm-hmm. She almost views him as a confidant, but he's just kind of like, no. What's their dynamic? Does it evolve over time? Does it change? Or is it always just like, he's sort of like the secret keeper of the house maybe, and she, projects onto him like, this guy's on my team, but he's really like, who is this lady?
Yeah. So initially, like Niles' greatest pleasure in life is making Cece miserable. Like for several seasons, that's like all he does. He hates Cece and he hates Miss Badcock, and he'll do anything to like make her feel sad.
Who's Miss Badcock?
Cece Badcock.
Cece Badcock?
Yeah, Babcock.
Ah, boy. Okay.
Yes, but okay. And we're jumping ahead a lot here, but I think most people watching this show, listening to this podcast would already know this. They fall in love later.
Ooh.
Which I actually hate. I think that's so silly, but whatever. It'll happen when it happens, and we'll cross that bridge when it comes. But I think he basically realizes that like he couldn't live without her.
I hope they earn that, man.
I know, right? Should we move on to nanny trivia or
I have a couple more things that I had questions about.
Yeah.
Oh,
please. What's the body heat joke? I've never seen body heat. She does it. The line is, she goes, it had Kathleen Turner before her little side trip to Pepperidge Farm. Is that a fat joke?
It is. There's a lot of fat jokes in the nanny.
Okay. Also, what was Fran wearing? She's in like head to toe black and then just like a red leopard shiny vest. I was like, what is that?
There are so many social media accounts specifically dedicated to what Fran wore on this show.
Yeah, this fashion has really come around now to a point where it's like iconic in gay culture, first of all, as we learned a couple weeks ago from our guest. And I mean, there are videos dedicated to Fran's fashion. I know a lot of drag queens take inspiration from Fran's fashion. So yeah, I mean, on a Fran scale, this was a fantastic getup.
Okay, because I don't know the character well enough if the joke is like she's a little tacky. Because even in the theme song, she's like, she's the one wearing red when they're all in tan.
Yeah.
She's like loud in more ways than just her voice, which I did find. I made a note that the audio started peaking at, it turned out to be a joke, but I started writing. The audio started peaking at 2 minutes, 2:33, because Renée Taylor is screaming, and then Fran yells right back, like, yell it a little louder so the neighbors can hear, or whatever she did. But to me, I was like, oh my, that 2 minutes in, and I've never seen this before, and they're screaming at each other. It really was jarring for me.
Body Heat, by the way, was like a movie. It was like an erotic thriller, which is why it's such a big deal that she's watching Body Heat. There was like a ton of like very graphic sex between William Hurt and Kathleen Turner.
Okay, so I'm renting it from Redbox. I mean,
listen, it's a great, written and directed by Lawrence Kasdan. I mean, it's a great movie. Like,
I've heard the title. I just have never seen it.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
We had that in my house growing up, but it was like I wasn't allowed to watch. But it had been recorded from the video store, so it had its own handwritten label on it.
Yeah,
back when you used to be able to do that,
Right.
Yeah.
I also want to go on record and say that I did not like the cheap booby joke that happened at 13 minutes and 17 seconds.
Yes.
He goes, "Oh, I really like your booby," or something like that, as opposed to Bubby.
Maxwell
I'm like,
says, "You
cheap. I don't like this.
Yeah, he was like underestimated your booby, and she goes, "That's Bubby."
Thank you. I was like, bleh.
Yeah,
I'm too classy for this joke.
Yeah, it was a weak one.
We can move on after this. I just want to my favorite quote from the episode probably is the little boy who I don't like, but I was like, okay, props to the little boy. He goes, Yetta turns out to be pretty cool. Look, she gave me $100 for my bar mitzvah. Laugh break, and he goes, of course, she also thinks my name is Shmooey. And then it keeps coming back. Fran brings it up twice. She goes, you got the young one and Shmooey. And I was like, Shmooey. I thought that was cool. So that's,
yeah.
And so I want to go on record and say, while I do not like that little boy, I like that line.
And that is actually,
that's how we feel. Brighton's a tough character. They give him the weirdest lines. They do like all of these like cheesy, sexually charged jokes a lot of the time with him. Like I feel like they just have no idea how to write a little boy.
Mm-hmm. And he was mean to his sister at the beginning. It started off with him being mean.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that.
Mean.
Well, I think that your read on Brayton is very accurate. He's very entertaining, and he's a kid who can really deliver lines. So I think we always say like it's almost like they forget how old that character is supposed to be, and they just give him funny lines that they want to put in the show somewhere. Yeah. But yeah, he's not the heart of the show. I'll say that. All right, Nanny trivia.
Yeah. What do you got?
Okay, so for some context for Matt, in last week's episode, one of the subplots was that Mr. Sheffield had made Esquire's list of the year's most eligible bachelors, as he often does in like the lore of the show. And Shawn and I were like, in my mind, a list like that, like, they even mentioned that like JFK Jr. is on the list. We're like, is a Broadway producer really actually famous enough or influential enough to make that list? And we were both suspicious. This is where it gets really weird.
Yeah.
Okay, so Shawn, I thought that Esquire actually had this list. Like in my brain, I remembered there being a list of like the year's most eligible bachelors. And I was like, well, if it's not Esquire, it must have been People. And if it's not People, it must have been Vanity Fair. Like this thing has to exist. It doesn't exist. It's like this it's a collective delusion, like the Mandela effect. Like there's been like People's Sexiest Man Alive, who, by the way, this year was Keanu Reeves, 1994. I looked that up.
The year of the episode. Okay.
The year of the episode, 94.
I thought you meant this year. I was like, fresh off 1994.
Fresh off of what? Dracula? What was he? What did he?
94?
No, Speed. I think that would have been Speed.
It's the end of the line for you, Bodie. That's my favorite line from Point Break. I don't know why. I say, my friend had a cat named Bodie, so whenever I would walk into the house, I go, it's the end of the line for you, Bodie.
God, a solid Keanu impression will get me.
Yeah, really. 1994 was Speed, so this would have been for like fresh off of Speed.
Yeah, but regardless, we took a big left turn here into that, but this list doesn't exist. I mean, the closest things I could find, like Forbes has a 12 most eligible billionaire. There's a Vogue, the world's most eligible royal bachelors. Like Ebony had a list in 1960, but so I fully like would have bet serious money. Like that list is a thing that comes out every year. It's not. Mm-hmm.
I'm disappointed, shocked, and disappointed. We are literally shook.
It kind of makes sense, right? Like influential bachelors. Like, why would there be a list of that? It's just weird. They're not it's not like you can date them.
Yeah, but because people would eat it up, they'd buy those magazines off the shelf.
Sure, let's start a magazine.
Is that what? Not Win a Date with Tad Hamilton. What's the one where Robin from the '90s movies is like being chased down the street by all of the brides? I never saw it. I remember there was a trailer for it before something on one of the VHS tapes that I owned. Who was the
Chris
actor?
O'Donnell?
Chris O'Donnell.
Chris O'Donnell?
Is that what that movie's about?
I know what movie you're talking about too now.
I don't know what movie. I'm like remembering
from the 90s.
No, I followed. I followed.
Chris O'Donnell. What else was he in? He was in some other stuff.
He was in Scent of a Woman.
No, but he wasn't the boy in Scent of a Woman. Correct? Am I crazy?
He was a boy. He was a boy.
They had Philip Seymour Hoffman in Scent of a Woman. They had somebody else too. It was with The Bachelor. The Bachelor is the movie. It's him and Renée Zellweger. It was one of those things where when I was a kid, I don't know if I was alone in doing this. If I liked a movie, I would watch everything that the main actors had been in. So I'm like, I love Tom Hanks. So I'm going to watch like Joe versus the Volcano or something. And I'd be like, well, I liked Tom Hanks, so I should watch every Meg Ryan movie. So I started renting like from Blockbuster. I would rent like, I remember there was a movie called Hanging Up. Where it's her and Diane Keaton and one other person. And it's
Lisa Kudrow. And it's the first time I ever heard the word fuck ever. I remember being like, oh man, what an anticlimactic way to learn a curse word.
That's funny. So I did a similar thing, but I would do it with like writers and directors that I liked. And Jurassic Park came out. I got huge into Michael Crichton. And then I wanted to read and see every Michael Crichton movie that was ever made. And I ended up watching this movie with Wesley Snipes and Sean Connery.
The White Man Can't Jump.
Rising Sun. It's based on a book written by Michael Crichton, and it is the first time that I ever saw oral sex from a man to a woman, and I was so confused by what was happening. Like I didn't understand. And the oral sex plays like a pivotal plot point in the movie because this guy is going down on this girl when he's shot, and he has and then the girl's body is missing, and he has a pubic hair in between his teeth.
I'm sorry. Wait.
Yeah. So, and I remember being about maybe 12 years old and going to my mom and being like, I have a lot of questions.
Yes. That happened to me a couple of times. Starman. Do you remember Starman?
Yeah.
It's the first time I ever learned how to give somebody the finger. I had to go to my parents. I'm like, the heck is this? And they're like, no, don't do that to people.
Oh man.
God.
Little moments like that.
Influence us in weird ways, I guess.
Yep.
More than you think.
Cinema, movies.
There was no Yiddish this week, Toria.
No, there actually was two Yiddish. There was
what
two
Yiddish was there?
Movie.
Two. So
Yiddish.
Obviously, there's Yiddish in the title. Bubby is Yiddish for grandmother.
Fair.
Then, when in one of the opening scenes, when Grandma Yetta comes into the mansion and sees the little girl, she goes "Pizzolas," and that is just, it means little ones, teeny ones, and it's like an affectionate little thing that you can say.
Sometimes these words, I just hear them, and I've heard them so many times in my life that I don't even register them as like Yiddish words. I'm just like, oh yeah.
Actually, schmutz was also in this episode. We often overlook schmutz because it hardly registers to us as Yiddish anymore.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so Matt, normally Shawn and I say who's the Fran or the CC between the two of us, but I think it's more interesting just in general. Do you feel like you're the Fran or the CC based on what you saw? This is hard because you didn't see much CC. Or hey, if you really resonated with someone else, that can also be part of this.
I was probably the little boy playing Game Boy. I was trying to think where I was in the 90s, and that spoke to the my inner child. I need to see more CC. I can't make a decision that that drastic. It seems like an important thing, and I don't want to label myself. It's like, for the longest time, I walked around thinking I was a Charlotte, and then I realized I was a Miranda the whole time, So I pitched it to people. I'm like, no, you guys have it wrong. I'm a Charlotte. So I definitely don't want to, put that scarlet letter, put a scarlet C on my chest for CC.
You know what? You're saying that all in jest, but I really am the Miranda, and it really is awful.
Yeah, I'm a Miranda
really
too.
Awful.
I feel like
I'm a Charlotte for sure. So
no, you're not. You're a Samantha, and you know it.
Fair.
It's fine. Charlotte pooped her pants in the movie, so you can have that.
My friend made me watch it. Oh my God.
She does poop her pants.
Gosh.
Well, we should save all of this for when we start to do our recap show for the Sex and the City reboot.
It's an easy jump. They're both on HBO Max. You
Yeah,
can totally
and they're bringing
do it.
Sex and the City back.
Without Samantha, so who's going to watch it? Not me. To see what? Carrie?
The first episode I heard, they revealed she died of dysentery.
Oh, no, she tried to do the Oregon Trail.
Yep.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of synergy between the HBO shows and this podcast. Well, this has been so fun, Matt. I'm very, very. I feel like you just fit in, just like family. You fold it in, and it was very comfortable.
Oh, great!
Because I get a little bit of anxiety before we get a new energy infused into the dynamic, and this felt great.
No, it felt great. Matt, do you have stuff you want to plug?
Yeah, I'm at Matt Bennet on all social media. It's great to go and check me out there. I do a lot of fun things. I've been streaming on Twitch. I put up music videos and things like that. Yeah. I play with Shawn on Fortnite. So if you like Shawn and you like me, please come and check it out.
Yeah,
I do a good job of updating my socials. So
yeah, Shawn showed me a video that I'm blanking on. I don't remember.
So yes, I want to bring this up. So
what's the name of it? I was laughing so fucking hard.
Recently, Matt Bennet came into contact with this wonderful musician named Magic Simon and
lost gem of the 80s.
A lost gem of the 80s, and he was able to release Magic Simon's music video, Music Express. On his YouTube channel, on Matt Bennett's YouTube channel.
Right. I like to elevate artists that you might not have heard of before. So there's an artist named Magic Simon. He has a new music video, or it's an older music video, New to You, that you can go watch on my YouTube right now. Yeah. And it's great. It's like a lost gem, lost hit of the 80s.
It's really great.
Great. Repeat the line to me again. Something and sex. We can do rock.
We can dance. We can do drugs and sex. You and me, babe, holding on for dear life on the Music Express.
Yeah,
so good.
Oh my God! Please go watch that, everybody.
And then you can find our show on social media. Where, Toria?
Mr. Chef Pod with 2 F's at Mr. Chef Pod.
Yeah, that's on Twitter and on Instagram. And then also you can search just Mr. Sheffield, Mr. Sheffield podcast on Facebook. We got a little Facebook thing there. And I'm at Shawn Wrights on Twitter. And Toria, you are?
I'm at Toria Sheffy, 2 F's. Matt, my last name is actually Sheffield.
I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to bring it up.
Yeah,
I noticed,
and my father, it's weird that there's Charles Shaughnessy. He was Charles Sheffield, an English widower who moved to the States and married a Jewish woman. So, it's isn't in the stars. It's weird.
Yeah.
But
does this show give you a new perspective on your parents' marriage?
Yeah, that it was really terrible, and I wish it.
And I.
This was one of my favorite episodes we've ever done. Thank you, Matt Bennet.
Hey, thank you for having me. What a blast.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week with more Mr. Sheffield podcasts. Bye.
Bye.
The Flashing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
I go, Miss Fine.